If you don't understand this one thing about confidence, you will never sound, look, or feel confident whenever you speak. You see, when I was a teenager and I was trying to learn all of these things about speaking, I didn't understand this concept. So I would watch all of these different YouTube videos, and every single thing that I watched, all of these, how to be confident, how to sound confident when you speak, all of these different things, all of the advice I would take would go in one ear and go right out the other. Or if I practice it, I would practice it once and forget, and I would never actually make any progress. But once I was able to actually understand this one thing that I'm about to tell you here, that's how I was actually able to make serious progress towards improving my confidence over the years of practice that I put in. And from there, I was actually able to become the kind of person that I can respect when speaking and actually sounds confident whenever I'm actually talking to somebody. And now, by the end of this video, you'll understand why exactly you don't feel confident and you don't sound confident whenever you speak, and the things that you can do and the specific steps and actions that you can take to get yourself from where you are right now to where it is that you want to be. So in order to get into how you can actually be and sound confident whenever you're speaking, the first thing that you need to understand is why introverted guys struggle with acting confident when they speak. And if you're paying attention, I actually already gave you the answer right there. It's the fact that you're acting confident. You see, when I was younger, I used to take the advice, fake it till you make it. And I would try my best to put on my most confident version of myself. I'd walk up in there, shoulders back, my chest out and everything like that. I'm wearing a nice shirt and everything. And yes, to an extent, it kind of helped. But because I didn't actually have a clear understanding of what confidence even was in the first place, the act that I was putting on was flawed. So I'd go into social situations trying to emulate some guy that I saw online, trying to imitate some other person that's just not me at all. And every single time I would get into those situations, it would come off as inauthentic, weird, a little bit awkward. And anytime that I was faced with something that was a little bit unexpected, I wouldn't know how the confident version of me was even supposed to act in that situation. And it would just not come off well. You see, think about it like this. Imagine you have two people. One of them is a guy who's acting cool, who's trying his best to be cool. And on the other hand, you have some guy who just is cool. I'm sure you can probably think of a couple people that you know from like high school or just your schooling days when you were younger who were like this. The person who's always trying to be cool, maybe they're putting on these tacky designer clothes and maybe they walk a certain way or try to talk like some specific person. The person that tries to be cool, if you think about it, it's kind of funny that they were always the most uncool person every single time. Maybe they even had a big friend group or something like that. Maybe they were mildly popular, but they were really probably disliked by a lot of people because it felt inauthentic. Whereas the person who was just naturally cool, I guess just by whatever society standards are at the time, or if you're in school, whatever cool meant to you at that time, the person who's just naturally like that just naturally attracts people to them because they're being authentic and they have a clear understanding of who they are as a person, and they just naturally are like that. They don't need to put on any kind of persona or try too hard and overdo it. You see, that's what happens when you shift from acting confident to living confidence. You see, a lot of the time, people have this wrong idea of what confidence is, especially introverted people, and they struggle with this because they go like, well, confidence means that I have to act in a way that's just not like me at all. So I'm going to be more, say, extroverted version of myself. And of course, I'm gonna be completely honest, I'm not too big of a fan of those labels, but it is what it is. People use them anyway, so I just use them here because it makes it easier for people to understand. But that's why fake it till you make it doesn't actually work, because if you're over here thinking that confidence means that you have to be the loudest in the room, taking up all kinds of space, doing all of these different things that might not really be authentic to you, naturally, you're not going to sound very confident whenever you're actually speaking because you're putting on this fake version of yourself. Because a lot of the time, you don't actually have to change your personality to sound confident. You see, a lot of the time, like my niche on this YouTube channel is talking about speaking skills. And a lot of the time, the people who talk about these things online, they tend to be a little bit more, how would I describe their personalities? Not that there's anything bad with it, but they tend to be like a little bit more of that larger than life personality kind of moving. That's not really me, but I don't need to be like that in order to get my points across. I can still be a great speaker without having to take up the most space in the room, without having to be the loudest, without having this just outrageous personality. Of course, I'm not saying that anyone has an outrageous personality, but you get the idea. But I've talked about this before, where people think that introversion causes them to have specific personality traits like being shy, like being unconfident, like not being good at speaking. And nowhere in that description of being an introvert does it actually say that. It doesn't mean that at all. But when you think these things, it makes it so that you're literally incapable of actually sounding confident when you speak. Because imagine if you go into a presentation going like, I'm gonna suck at this presentation, I'm gonna be horrible. Just naturally, if you went into that presentation, you'd have these subconscious thoughts of, oh yeah, let me just slightly talk a little bit less loud because I don't actually believe in the things that I'm saying. Or maybe you think to yourself, oh, I'm just not very good at speaking, so I'm not going to try my hardest to actually get rid of these ums and ahs when I talk. Maybe I might even do them more because I'm nervous. You might not consciously be thinking these things, but subconsciously, this is what you're actually feeling. And that's what's messing up your speech and your communication. It's the mindset, the belief that you have about your confidence, about being an introvert. You go like, oh nah, because I'm an introvert, I can't do that. If you think like that, you are absolutely shooting yourself in the foot. So in order to actually know how to sound confident, you need to understand that it's not this innate thing that happens to be with extroverts or that happens to be with specific kinds of people or that's genetic. It's not this like magical woo-woo thing that you just naturally pick up every once in a while. Confidence comes from one simple thing, and it's so simple, but once I actually understood this, it was so powerful, and it actually led me to start actually making the changes that I needed to actually go from where I wanted to be in my life. So where does confidence actually come from? Confidence comes from competence, and the way that I like to see it is competence is, well, one, it's expertise, skills, knowledge, but at its core, it's knowing that you can handle a situation or whatever situation is thrown at you because of that expertise and that experience and that knowledge that you have. So, for example, if you had practiced and studied 1,000 hours for an exam, you wouldn't really feel very nervous going into that exam if you would literally put in 1,000 hours because you're like, I've seen it all before, I know what I'm doing. It's the same thing in literally anything else. And once you understand this, you can understand that you're actually already a confident person because there's probably something that you're better at 90% of people at doing, or at least 50% of people at doing. If we just went and picked some random person off the street, maybe you're really good at chess and you could go like, yeah, I'm pretty confident I'd probably beat that person. And you wouldn't feel very nervous going into that game with them. Same thing with just some people have really good skills when it comes to sports. Some people have really good skills when it comes to video games. That was me when I was a kid, at least. Stuff like that. It's the kind of thing where in that situation, you would feel super confident, even if you had 1,000 people watching. But in other things that you haven't actually deliberately practiced, especially like speaking, because a lot of people go like, oh, I talk all the time. I don't need to practice speaking. What are you talking about? But that ends up making it so they're not competent when they speak. So when you can actually build the competence in your speech and know that, okay, if I actually just put in deliberate practice towards it and deliberate practice towards improving my competence in speaking, I will sound 1,000 times more confident and feel 1,000 times more confident. And I'll actually be able to live that confidence instead of just putting on a front to pretend that I actually have that. So of course, to build this competence, you need to put in deliberate reps and practice to be able to do that. But this advice isn't just as simple as just practice, bro. If you actually know the things that you need to focus on, and the actual mindset shifts that you need to have to actually make those changes, then that's how you're going to 10x your progress instead of just going like, okay, let me go and practice speaking and practice doing that without actually thinking about the specific tactics that you need to employ. So there's two sides to being competent when it comes to your communication. The first side is the technical side. So that's going to be all of the specific speaking techniques, your cadence, the way that your voice sounds, the way that you project, all of those different things. The second side is the nonverbal / mental side. So this will be things like the level of comfort that you have when you're speaking and your mindset. Now, for technical skills, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown because I want to focus more on the nonverbal side because that's what's actually going to make it even easier to learn those technical skills. Plus, I have a bunch of other videos where I'll be going over those. And then on top of that, I have a program in the description. It's completely free. You can go and check that out if you like. So the first thing is the technical side. So we'll go over some quick things. We'll have, say, literally just the easiest advice is to, one, speak louder, because if you don't speak very loud, people aren't going to hear what you're saying, and they're going to think that you don't believe what you're saying, that you don't have any conviction behind your words. So that's one thing. The next thing is to, say, finish all of your sentences on a down note. So say instead of going like this to finish a sentence, you finish a sentence like this. Last thing is to make sure that you're aware of your body language. This will be things like gesticulation when you're moving, making sure that you're not closed off when you're speaking, and kind of making sure that you're kind of taking less space. If you take a little bit more space and you're comfortable in the room, then that's how you're actually able to make a little bit more of an impact and sound a little bit more confident when you speak. So those are the technical skills. But we don't really want to focus on that. There's, of course, a bunch of other things. Those are just a few tips that I wanted to give right there, just so you can have something to go off of. But generally, what's going to help you more is this nonverbal mental side, because then you can actually employ technical skills a lot better. So, the nonverbal side. How exactly can we improve our competence in this skill? So the way that we improve on this is to actually understand the way that confidence looks and sounds whenever you're speaking. And the way that you actually see this is by looking at a lot of big, say, presidents or professional speakers or people who are just really, really good at oration. What you'll see is that a lot of these people, or all of them, pretty much what they have in common, despite all of the different things when it comes to their speaking patterns, their voice, etc., is that they're all comfortable when they speak. So if you can build competence in the skill of being comfortable when speaking, it doesn't matter how good your technical skills are, you'll actually sound a lot more confident when you speak than most people will, even people who have practiced the technical skills. And that's why I didn't want to put too much focus on that for this video. I'll get into that into other videos because it is very important. But here I want to make sure that you can master being comfortable when speaking. And of course, this sounds too simple. It's like, well, being comfortable. I'm a comfortable guy. I can just relax when I talk. It doesn't really help. I still shake. I still get nervous. And the response that I would give to that is, if you think that the advice that relaxing is not going to help you, do you think that being nervous and shaking and overthinking in your head is going to make you a better speaker? Because I bet you can think of all the different times where you've had times where you've jumbled over your words, or where you've been nervous during a presentation, or where you've gone like, and every single time, it's because you weren't comfortable when speaking. Maybe there was something in the crowd of the people that you were speaking to that made you feel uncomfortable. Maybe it was your first time speaking to a camera. Maybe it was whatever circumstances that were going on. Or maybe it was your own self-belief. But here we're going to learn how you can actually overcome that to be a lot more comfortable whenever it is that you're speaking and make a lot more of an impact. So the first technique that I like to use is something that I like to call freezing time. So think about this. Say that you had a conversation with somebody, and at any time in the conversation, you had the superpower of being able to freeze time and to be able to think about what it was that you were going to say next, so you could give yourself the perfect answer, and you can freeze time for as long as you want. So if you were like this, how exactly would you feel in this conversation? I know me personally, I would feel super comfortable because, well, if they say something I'm not expecting them to say, I can just freeze time and think for as long as I want and think of the best answer. You see, now in real life, you can't obviously freeze time unless you somehow have superpowers. But the best part about this is that you don't actually need that much time to think about a good answer. And even if you can't think about a good answer, you can just easily go like, I don't know. But generally, you have a lot more time than you think when you speak. You see, when I was younger, I used to struggle with this so much because I thought that you had to get every single word that you needed to out as fast as possible. And that awkward silence should be avoided at all costs. But silence is actually your best friend when speaking. Because it gives you time to think. So if you learn how to master silence when you talk, you can have way more of an impact behind the words that you're saying. So the first thing that you need to do in order to actually master that is to slow down your speech. I'm doing it a little bit more right now because I'm talking about it. But if you slow down your speech, it gives you a lot more time to formulate your words and to think about how best you can actually form a sentence. And the second thing that you need to do is to pause. So a lot of the time people give this advice and go like, oh yeah, just pause. But they don't actually explain why it's super helpful. You see, if someone asks you a question, say someone goes like, oh, what do you think about this new thing that happened on the news? And instead of just going straight into an answer, I pause. Maybe it's just 2-3 seconds. You know, I actually think that it was really intriguing. I say something like that. What that does to the other person when you say that is, one, it makes you look good because it makes it look like you actually are thinking about what you're going to say, and they go like, oh, I am feeling a lot more anticipation to what this person is going to say because, well, they thought about it a lot more, so I think that it's going to be pretty intelligent. Even if it's not intelligent, it's still fine. They're thinking that anyway, so you sound a little bit better. The second thing is that you actually buy yourself the time to think of a good answer, and you actually don't even need that much time to. You think that you might need to actually take several minutes to perform the best answer, but a lot of the time, your brain is a lot smarter than you think, and you can come up with things on the spot to say a lot better than you think that you can. But if you just jump straight into it, your mind is not able to catch up to the words that you're saying, and that's what happens, and that's what causes, the actual word jumbles and all of these weird ums and ahs and all of these things that make your communication a lot more muddy. Now, the next tip that I want to give you will help you to calm your body overall. And once you can do this, it just makes it a lot easier to slow down when you're speaking and to actually just have a lot more of a relaxed presence. Because when you're relaxed, other people are relaxed too. They can see that your body language is relaxed and they're going to be more receptive to actually hearing what you're going to say. If you've had a time where you're speaking to someone and you can tell that they're really, really nervous when they're speaking and they're shaking and they're speaking really fast, you feel a little bit uneasy too. But when they're calm and when they're relaxed, then that's when you also feel calm and relaxed too, especially if you're in a bit more of a high-stakes situation. So the thing that I like to do is to focus on diaphragmatic breathing. So that sounded really pretentious. Basically, it just means that you're breathing into your stomach. So how exactly are you breathing right now? So before I said any of that, was your breath making it so that your chest and shoulders were going up? Or was it making it so that your stomach was moving out and your chest and shoulders didn't move that much? Be honest with yourself. It's completely fine if it was a shallow breath that goes up here. But what happens when you breathe shallowly is that you don't give yourself enough support and you don't give yourself enough oxygen. So your voice gets less support and it just doesn't sound as good too. That's one thing. And another thing is that you're not relaxing as much as you could. They always say, or just the general advice is to take deep breaths before, say, giving a speech or to give a performance. And that's the reason why you're giving yourself more oxygen and you're allowing your nervous system to actually relax when you do that. So this should just be your default for breathing, and it takes a lot of time to adjust to, but if you can just randomly think throughout the day, like, oh yeah, breathe deeply, breathe deeply. Me, I have a to-do list that I have on my phone, and literally at the top of my to-do list, I just say breathe deeply. So anytime I check, I'll go like, oh yeah, no, I'm supposed to be breathing deeply into my stomach. So when you do that, it makes it so that, one, you can employ it into your pauses, makes you a little bit more relaxed, especially if you're in a bit more of a high-stakes situation. But two, your overall body is relaxed and it'll help other people to feel relaxed around you. And that will make you, in turn, sound more confident. Another bonus tip with that is that naturally when you breathe really deeply, it also makes your voice a little bit deeper and just a little bit more supported, and you'll just sound a lot better naturally. The last thing is more of a mental thing, but once I was able to understand this, it made me 10 times more free and authentic in my speech whenever I talked. And the big thing that you need to understand is that you shouldn't worry so much about what other people think about when you speak. Because naturally, if you think so much about what other people are going to think and you think that other people are going to judge you when you talk, naturally, they actually will do that. But if you're a lot less caring about it, of course, everyone cares about what other people think. I care about what other people think. But if you put less weight on it, You don't need to get rid of it fully, but if you put less weight on it, then naturally, other people won't judge you as much as you think that they will. So one thing that I actually learned that really made me a lot more comfortable with my speaking is that people actually barely notice your mistakes when you talk. Unless there's some nerd like me who cares a lot about communication and is always like, he's using ums and ahs, or he's using this thing. A lot of the time, people don't actually notice. They just notice when you're a good speaker. But they might not notice any mistakes that you make if you just completely brush past them and just keep moving and actually just make yourself a lot better of a speaker. I still make plenty of mistakes when I talk, even though I've been practicing this stuff for years. But because I don't dwell on it, naturally, other people don't dwell on it too. So a great example of this is actually from around the time when I started college. I joined a singing group. And I remember we would have practices and rehearsals. Anytime we would do a practice run, naturally, because you're still learning something, occasionally people would make mistakes. And whenever they would make a mistake, they would go like, ooh, or go like, and like look around all awkward or whatever, and something like that whenever they would make a mistake. And naturally, what would happen if you do that, other people would also say it too, and then they would also kind of start making mistakes too, and it would just kind of be a domino effect that might end up causing more problems down the line. And what the leader of the group told us at the time, especially as we got closer to performances, was anytime that you make a mistake, especially on stage, you just have to keep smiling through it and act like it didn't happen at all. Because if you do that, it's actually more likely that the audience won't even notice because they don't even know how it's supposed to sound in the first place. So if you make the mistake, they don't notice, they won't care. They'll only notice if you make a big deal about it. And this was something that I actually learned to apply to my communication. Anytime that naturally, I'm a human being, so naturally I would make a mistake, or I would trip over my words, or I'd stutter, or make an ums and ah. Even after years of practice, I do it a lot less now, but it still happens here and then. But the thing that sets me apart from now compared to the time that I was actually still learning this stuff and when I was still struggling especially, is that I don't overthink it in my head whenever I would make a mistake. I just move right past it and keep getting into what I was going to say next, as if I didn't even make a mistake in the first place. And naturally, that makes people think that you're a better speaker anyway, because they just won't even notice it. It'll just be like a random little blip in your performance or in your speech or whatever it is that you're doing. So if you stop worrying so much about those mistakes when they happen, it's almost like they're not happening in the first place. And you're one, feel a lot more confident because you're like, well, if I make a mistake, it doesn't even matter. And then two, you'll sound a lot more confident because people don't even notice those mistakes in the first place. So once you master all of those things, you'll be able to learn how to actually be comfortable when you speak. And that will do absolute wonders for your speech, because technical tips are so helpful, but this is the actual foundation that will make those tips stick and actually make them a lot more powerful when you employ them into your speech. You see, confidence is built, it's not instant. So of course, these things are not going to be things that you just naturally master in 2 seconds after watching this video. But if you consciously think about this a little bit more, I want to leave you with an action step. And that should be that the next time you speak, just practice one of these things, whether it's breathing deeply and into your stomach, whether it's freezing time, whether it's just not caring about the mistakes that you make or what other people think about you and those mistakes. That's what's actually going to be able to help you to make the actual progress towards sounding confident. If you master these 3 things, and also what I said earlier about how confidence actually works and how your mindset should be towards it, about how confidence comes from competence, you'll stop actually acting confident, and you'll start learning to live confidence and to actually have that already built into you from the inside. And of course, it's a lifelong journey. It's going to take time. And of course, there's going to be times where you slip up. But over time, you will get better. And you need to believe that you can get better because you are already a confident person. I hope this was helpful. And if you're an introverted guy trying to improve his communication skills, click the top link in the description. I have a free program that'll help you with that. And then if you also want to work with me one-on-one, you can also click the other link to go and check that out. So outside of that, hope you have a great rest of your day. And remember, don't overthink it because you're probably a lot better at speaking than you think that you are. Have a good one.